And so to be here so fully that you disappear into this moment. There is no one here, there is just being. And the being is vast, unbounded, and free. And you are the being that is vast and free. You are that vast, infinite field that is ever free, ever present. Just to be here. To surrender all ideas and concepts and beliefs into the simple presence of being. And just start to notice the aliveness of the presence. It is your own presence. It is what you are, this alive presence. It just is. And when attention drops into simple awareness, the noticing is of the presence, the alive presence that is always here. It is not inside the body or outside the body. It is just here without a location. Even if to start with, the felt sense of presence feels to be in the body, as the focus of attention drops to be aware of just the presence of being, the noticing is that the alive presence is not contained. It's not actually in the body. Just to be the alive presence, be one with the alive presence, so as to merge into the discovery that you are the alive presence. And that this alive presence is everywhere. And as attention comes to the alive presence, it is more and more noticeable. We could then say consciousness is consciously aware of itself, awake to itself, aware of itself. And as the attention of consciousness is upon itself, there is an enlivening of the field. So the alive presence is very obvious, just the presence that is here. And at the same time, there is such a depth of stillness in the presence. Still, silent presence. So just being here as yourself, as the simple presence, that there is nothing to do, nothing to get or understand, nothing to achieve. You already are everything that is longed for. You cannot become because you already are. This is not a journey in time where you will get something or achieve something. It is about disappearing from time and space into the eternal, boundless presence that is the true essence nature. It's a disappearance of being someone into being no one and yet somehow being everything everywhere. Not needing any kind of definition, not needing to know anything, just to be yourself. And the knowing of the being is such a fullness, shining so bright and clear that it is more than enough. It is wholeness to know yourself. It is a fullness where the fullness is constantly running over itself in surrender, brimming over with the nectarine bliss of being, an effulgence so sublime, so radiant. And this is the true nature of all beings. There never has been any separation, so there can not be any union or reunion. It is just to be yourself, to relax deeply enough out of the sense of me and mine and into the vast, open, boundless field. Enter yourself, the fullness of yourself, by slipping out of your costume, out of the roles, out of the story, out of all of the ideas and concept, and just to be yourself. What we are speaking of is such a depth of relaxation, such a depth of relaxation that everything that we have thought that we are and have imagined ourselves to be just disappears in the actual realization of what we are in truth. The purity, the sublime beauty, the vast open field of presence that is silent and free. And you are that. You have always been that timeless, eternal being. And so as these words come, these words are that, speaking to that. Remember, remember the freedom, remember the peace and simplicity. Remember this silent presence that is beaming bright in the knowing of itself. An invitation into this deep relaxation where attention relaxes. That attention does not need to attend to anything. That attention relaxes, softens, lets go. There is nothing to do, nothing to take care of, nothing to uphold, to literally collapse the attention into this moment. It is not to even imagine that collapsing the attention is something that can be done. There is no how to. It is just to allow these words as they come. The resonance of the invitation is the self speaking to itself, the consciousness itself speaking to itself. And curiously, not even in words, right? Where consciousness hears itself, it's not following the words. It's just resonating, attuning, remembering. It is akin to the ears of consciousness pricking up and recognizing something familiar, right? An attunement. Consciousness itself starts to recognize its own essence nature. There is a magnetic pull in the resonance, in the frequency that is familiar, because it is what you already are, and what you already are recognizes itself, and attunes to itself. And in that attunement, in the unseen, unexplainable, unmoving field, the attunement is the recognition, remembering, the self remembering itself, the being just simply being. So there is a natural letting go, a natural surrender, nothing to be done, nothing to be understood. There's absolutely nothing that anyone can do. You cannot do letting go, you cannot do surrender. You can just be here. And being here is just to be yourself, to be exactly as you are, not to try to change this moment in any way, to absolutely let go of all trying, all efforts to make a mood or change this moment. Really, the relaxation is the absolute allowing of this moment, just to be exactly as it is, that whatever is here right now is the glory, is God, is the wholeness. Nothing needs to change. Everything just as it is utter perfection. We do not need to be more this or more that or more this. We do not need to create any kind of environment or specific circumstances. In a way, the naturalness is the perfect environment. The naturalness is the perfect situation. So even if it feels like mind is busy, even if it feels like I'm not really relaxing, it doesn't matter. To allow whatever is here is how true relaxation happens. We're not talking about relaxing your muscles, right? We're not talking about anything on the level of the physical. We're speaking about consciousness recognizing itself and attuning to itself, so that the frequency of mind consciousness naturally relaxes by attuning to a finer frequency, right? So mind consciousness, in its essence nature, if it's bubbling away on the surface at a denser frequency, when consciousness hears this frequency, this resonance, it starts to attune to the finer frequency. Will always attune to the finest frequency possible. And it's not fathomable or understandable, and it cannot be done. It's a natural relaxation, an attunement to the finest frequency, where consciousness itself recognizes itself. And then there is this relaxation in the density of mind consciousness into the universal field of cosmic consciousness, the unbounded openness, into the emptiness, right? Away from content, away from the projections and the mind's constant creation of things and stories and more ideas and concepts and instructions for itself. away from the harshness of the mind trying to control itself, trying to hold a position. So just to realize that you cannot even relax, you cannot fake this kind of relaxation, right? It's natural. And if just by being here, you are being carried like the Pied Piper playing the pipe and the little dancing ratty rats following along. It's the way that consciousness is. Consciousness hears. Really, it's not the pipe, it's more like Krishna's flute, right? It hears the finest possible resonance and it attunes because it is already that. And consciousness itself starts to recognize itself. It starts to fall into the recognition. It softens away from the story, from being someone, from wearing a costume, from needing to control. Consciousness itself softens and starts to attune and remember its fine essence nature as the eternal, timeless being. And then the direct experience starts to feel boundless and open and free and simple. The direct experience of consciousness itself, which is you yourself, right? You don't have to transform or change into anything. You already are. And it's just attuning into the deeper unbounded field of the fine frequency of your cosmic universal nature. And here, the direct experience is recognition. Oh yes, the innermost being knows itself. It doesn't have to do anything. It simply remembers itself. You simply remember who you are in truth. And where this has already been remembered and recognized, there's just a falling in to the flow of grace, a deepening, a resonating. And where there is a knowing and a fine frequency of remembering, this frequency is creating a finer resonance of the whole alive field, which is supporting all consciousness to recognize itself. So there is nothing to do, nothing to understand, nowhere to get to, just to simply be here and to let go into the not knowing and the felt sense of just being here, being carried, being the openness, being the simplicity, where the mind knows nothing, the being knows itself. So this alive presence that is everywhere, unbounded, to feel the enlivened field of this presence, that it is the felt sense of your own presence. And as you feel this felt sense of your own presence, you can feel that it is everywhere, that it is uncontained, and it is so alive. And the aliveness is the awakeness of the field, right? So where we can speak of awakening, there's an imagining that someone awakens, but really it's a remembering and a recognition of this ever-present awake field, and that you are the awake field. The awake field is the transcendent field. So as we transcend and come to the felt sense of being the awake field, there's this openness, and the direct experience starts to feel more expanded, without edges, without boundaries, no containment, no limitations. And this sense of freedom is the sense of being yourself, the free one that you have always been, underneath the story of being bound or held. There has always been this freedom, and you are this freedom, this silence, this simplicity, this ever-present openness. Just to feel in the immediacy as the words come, the receiving of the pointing is an immediate recognition, an immediate direct experience, right? So to not create any idea with the mind of looking for something that is in the wrong direction. It's an immediate receiving of the pointing, and either it lands and is recognized, or it is working in the unseen to refine and open by bringing about an attuned recognition in the vast openness of the field of consciousness. So it is just to be here, that nothing needs to change. To just be here, to be yourself, is to be here so unguarded and simple and innocent, where nothing is wanted. And as these words come, as you feel the recognition, to revel in the recognition of yourself, to be the wide open heart, to be the spacious, boundless being that is recognizing and remembering itself and does not need anything from this moment, because the knowing of itself is enough. It is more than enough. It is the radiant heart that is shining in remembering. It is like fresh air or a wellspring to just feel the attunement with yourself, the silent sanctuary of simple being, the recognition that you have always been free. You have always been free. There has never been any true containment or separation. It is the remembering of freedom. Remember the freedom and unboundedness. Remember the preciousness and softness of the wide open heart of being that just simply is. And hear the peace. Hear the undisturbable peace that you are the peace. Not someone seeking peace or experiencing peace. It's more intimate than that. You are the peace. You never have been someone. That is the illusion, that you have always been the peace. You have always been the being. And this remembering is the remembering in the direct experience of being the boundless field. That you are the vast open spaciousness where you can be aware of mind and body and the person or the character. The character, the person is taking place in you. You're the vast open space. The whole world is taking place in you. You are not defined by anything on the surface of life. You are not defined by anything that you are aware of. You are the undefinable, unexplainable, immaculate vastness of the eternal, infinite being. There is no separation. There never has been. What we are speaking of is the end of experience, the end of someone, but not in a way that the mind needs to fear, because the mind is not someone. The mind is consciousness, right? There is no mind of someone. It is the consciousness itself that is remembering its essence nature. So to the mind, there can be these ideas of, well, we don't want to deny existence. We don't want to deny the someone or the humanness. We're not speaking about denying anything at all. We're not denying the humanness. We're not denying this whole appearance of the glory. What we come to recognize is that what we tend to call world is the mind, and the mind creates an appearance, which is a projection essentially. But there is an appearance in truth, which is the radiant, shining glory of God. In the oneness, there is no world. There is just the glory, just divine wholeness. There is only one, with no second, no other. So we are coming to recognize, remember this. We're not denying anything. We are coming to feel the finer resonances, frequencies. So there is a deep, intelligent knowing of what all of this is from the true perspective. And in this, there is no denying of anything. In fact, the intimacy and the love and the openness and the unguardedness of being the being allows a richer, fuller, embodied living of life as life itself. So the mind can have all of these ideas, and none of them are true. As these words come, the resonance where there is recognition, where there is an attunement, it is just to attune with where there is this resonance and remembering, where you feel yourself enlivened, alive presence, and awake as the being, knowing itself as the being, just simply being. That there is nothing to get, nothing to do, that you already are. And what is just is. And so this simple resting here in the deep silence, the stillness of being the alive presence of being carried where there is a recognition, being carried into yourself, where the radiant light is shining. The self shines in and of itself. The simple knowing of itself is an illuminated knowing. And there is a lightness, a brightness, a radiant brilliance of the wide open heart, knowing itself and simply being itself. So it does not matter in any way what is happening on the surface of life. The flow of grace is just flowing to carry itself deeper and deeper into itself. Nothing to do, nothing to understand. It is just about being, and you cannot do being. And here, this letting go of all strategies, all positions, And if there is here, as the aware presence, an awareness of any attempts of mind, or we could say the attention to wander towards things, the unhooking is just through simple awareness. That simple awareness is like the superpower. Being yourself is the true power, the true power. And so to be aware of mind activity, and if attention tries to wander, just to watch it. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is out of alignment when you are just the aware presence that is watching. So just to watch, just to watch. Nothing can pull you away if you are watching as the awareness. And so as the awareness watching the moving and changing, watching the ebbs and flows, but not going out to watch and engage, just watching as the zoomed out pure awareness, watching the flow of consciousness, ebbing and flowing, moving and changing, letting go of the commentary, the narrative, the need to know, and just simply being. Stop. Be here. Nothing of the world, of the mind, is of any use here. It will not carry us into the longing of the heart. The longing of the heart carries itself into itself. If we misunderstand and we start to seek in the external for anything, it carries us away. And so to just be here, to stop, the silence of simply being. Just simply being. If anything that is moving and changing wants to pull the attention, just to watch it and to recognize that you are the undisturbable peace, that whatever is moving and changing does not touch the being, the peace and simplicity of the being, that the moving and changing is happening in the field, and you are the vast open field. We could say you are the space, not the content or experience. You are the open space, the openness. The space is unlimited. It is an unbounded, infinite spaciousness, just like the sky, right? Just like the sky is right here now, holding the sky in your hands, right? This is what you are, right? Holding yourself. You are the infinite being. You're not a thing. You are the space between things. You are the space in which things are happening. Remember? Between the words, the silence. Between the breaths, silence. Between everything, silence. Between every thought, silence. Just to notice that as the in-breath comes, at the top of the in-breath, there's a tiny pause, and this pause opens to the infinite. And naturally, the out-breath moves, and at the bottom of the out-breath, tiny pause, and in the tiny pause, silence, the infinite. There is such a potency to watch the breath, the breathing happening. It is the flow of life itself. No one is breathing. The flow of life. And when we open to this tiny pause at the top of the in-breath, emptiness, openness. We could say at the top of the in-breath, a felt sense of being full of emptiness, full of nothing, and an openness to the infinite. The natural flow at the bottom of the out-breath, exactly the same infinite field. Openness. There's no doing in the pause. It is just being the awareness that is watching the pause. And in the watching of the pause, the noticing. That in the noticing of the pause at the top and the bottom, as life is breathing itself and opening to the infinite, and a recognition of true nature, a recognition of the spaciousness. There is an aliveness in the pause. There is bliss in the pause, and it is the bliss of being yourself. Just to watch as the silence, as the still, unmoving awareness, to watch. Watch the breath in and out, naturally. No need to control anything. It's all about naturalness, watching the naturalness. And in the watching of the naturalness here, what we are speaking of here with the breath, the life flow, the pranic flow, we're aware of this pranic energy flow. The naturalness, the simplicity. In a way, this just shifts the attention away from the denser frequencies of mind, of thought, to the finer frequencies of the energy pranic body, the subtlety and this openness between everything, the pause, the silence. And we start to recognize that between every single thing, there is this silence, this vast open field, and it brings the sense of the background, the infinite, spacious being in the background, right to the foreground. When the focus of awareness is upon itself, upon being, the sense of being comes right to the foreground. It's no longer felt to be underneath the moving, changing. It comes right to the foreground. And in a way, there can be awareness of the moving, changing, but it's not the focus anymore. And at some point, the moving, changing falls away. it falls away, because when the mind is not attending to the thoughts and concepts, the mind consciousness merges into the cosmic universal consciousness, which is the unbounded infinite field. So here, recognizing this spaciousness, this unbounded spaciousness, and you are the spaciousness, you are the infinite, timeless being. And there is this remembering here. And the remembering is in the being itself, awake to itself, knowing itself. And if this recognition is already in place, the depth of remembering, it really brings forward the flow in the knowing, where this recognition of the being is already awake to itself. Then the knowing of the being is felt as an alive flow. It's flowing within itself. It's very alive. And there's this bliss of being, and it's a flow, a nectarine flow of bliss. And the flow of bliss is the flow of life. It's the flow of the life that moves as what we know as the breath. So as we come to this awareness of the flow, and we marry this awareness of the flow to the awareness of breathing happening, we start to recognize that just the flow of breathing is kind of an ecstatic, blissful flow of life, giving life to itself. The form, the body, the sense of body, the physicality is being animated by life. And you're not the physicality, you're the life. You're the life force, right? You're life itself. You're the flow of life, and you're animating this physicality. You're animating the character, right? You're not the character, you're animating, you're pervading the whole sense of the physicality, which is, of course, consciousness too. It's body consciousness. But you're not that as in a separate body or a separate mind. You're life itself. You're the flow of life itself. And the flow of life is the flow of grace. It's a flow of intelligence, and it recognizes itself. And as it recognizes itself, the being knowing itself as the being, the recognition is this flow. It's alive and it's flowing. And you start to feel that when we're speaking of the breath or the breathing, it's not some body. It's not like a set of bellows, right? Right? No one's doing it, right? We have the ability to control, right? There's a faculty within the nervous system, part of the consciousness, where we can control, where it seems like we have choice and we can control. But what we're speaking of is that natural flow, that if you held your breath, at some point that flow would burst through to continue to give life to the physicality, right? Life is on its own terms, right? Life is choosing. God is choosing, right? Whether the form is animated, is pervaded by life. And it's to recognize in the alive flow that you are the life, not the person, not the flesh and bones, right? You're not the costume that you're wearing. You're the eternal life. You're the flow of life. And when this old body wears out, right, the flow of life, it keeps flowing. It's just not pumping itself into the animation of this, right? Instead of moving as the breath and into the cells, right? And animating, right? It's all consciousness, intelligence, it's all intelligence. Instead of moving in this configuration, it flows even more freely, free of body, free of body. Whee! It's dancing free, right? It's dancing free. But you can feel yourself as this life dancing free right now, right? You're the life that is dancing free. You can feel the achy old body, right? And that the life is moving into the achy old body. But the more that you feel yourself as life, you're not bothered by the body. You're not bothered by the physicality. And there's also a grace where the alignment with being the consciousness actually allows the flow of life to start to reconfigure and rejuvenate, start to bring rejuvenation. Rasayana, right? It starts to bring rejuvenation, starts to attempt to infuse even the physicality with immortality. Right? It attempts, so can start to feel like this old body starts to feel a little bit more sprightly again, like it's juiced up by rasa, right? True essence, nature, the juice, the nectar, right? When we really come into being the flow of life, being the flow of nectarine grace, right? Even this old body, this old bag of bones can start to feel a little bit more jiggy jig, right? So, but we don't have any expectations. We're not expecting anything to happen, but there's all kinds of incredible, miraculous rejuvenation that can happen, because consciousness, when it's completely aligned in its true nature, it is the flow of nature. It is the flow of nature. It's a complete alignment with nature. So we come into being the being, and being the being that knows itself is the flow of life. And we recognize that we are life, living in harmony and balance with itself. So part of life, living in harmony and balance with itself, is that it starts to create situations on the surface of life in order to release old tensions and distractions and karmic energies, in order to free itself, right? On every layer, it starts to remove the debris, it starts to refine itself and purify and transform itself. It's all the flow of consciousness. So the more that we come into the knowing of what we are as consciousness, this alignment with true essence nature, there's this incredible flow of rasa, of essence, that is rejuvenating itself, and it's working to purify and transform itself. When this depth of alignment happens, the physicality can start to shift, right? It's a kosha in the Vedic teachings. It's a kosha. It's a layer. It's a layer of consciousness. It's the Manomaya kosha, right? It's the physicality, and it can be rejuvenated. It can be restored. It can restore itself. It can miraculously, when there's a complete alignment, so that in a way, digestion, the whole process of digestion is the process of nature aligning with nature and being able to digest all of itself in every moment. And what this is life surrendering into life, so that everything that is happening and taken in is fully digested and leaves no toxic residue. And what we're speaking of is life experiencing itself and fully allowing, receiving, and processing itself, digesting itself, and leaving no toxic residue. And so too are we speaking of what we take in, eat, take in. If it's in alignment with nature, it just nourishes, deeply nourishes the consciousness. It's consciousness nourishing itself. When we eat prana, and we only eat prana, we're nourishing, we're using that flow, and the byproduct of this is soma, it's nectar, it's rejuvenating, right? So it leaves no toxic waste, right? So this rejuvenation happens. It's about freshness, it's about prana, it's about light and aliveness, right? It's about everything being alive and recognizing its aliveness. So this is where we hear about not eating things that are dead, right? Whether it's on any level. And this is why, because it's about this aliveness. It's about this rejuvenation. It's about rasa. It's about light illuminating itself. It's about the flow of life, living itself and not burdening itself through, in a way, even on this level, we can collaborate with the imbalance, right? The whole of the world of separation, all of that food, seeming food that's just toxic, it's got absolutely no nourishment on the true pranic level, but it's all separation. It's all the world of separation feeding itself to collaborate, to, it's all part of, we could say, the delusion. It's all about killing itself off, right? So there's these ways that we can absolutely, the more that we come to feel the life flow, we feel the truth in this depth of nourishment in every single fiber of the being, right? That we're not someone that's choosing this or choosing that. It's a deep nourishment on the deepest level. So all of this is about coming to be yourself. It's all about the simplicity. It's all about the flow of life surrendering into itself and not burdening itself with toxins. And so even the flow of life and how it creates the situations that release the stress, right? It's releasing what we have not been able to digest. It's regurgitating the toxins, the emotional toxins that are suppressed in our nervous systems. It's regurgitating by surfacing the emotional toxins so that we can process by releasing the stress so that we're free and unburdened, right? It's incredible. It's miraculous how nature supports nature, right? And we naturally are then drawn to eat the sun, to eat the sun and be nourished by the flow of nature supporting nature, right? And the deeper in we go, the more simple and the more obvious this is, right? So as these words are coming, perhaps you can feel that where you've heard this kind of information on the surface of life as knowledge, you can start to feel it as truth. You can start to feel the resonance of what rasa, essence, is, what it means to digest everything fully and not leave toxins, right? So that in a way, what that means in the life is that whatever we take in as food, that we on the finest level, it can be so fully digested and it just nourishes itself as light. It gets to make light, ojas, it's called ojas. It gets to make light. The digestive process is so full that it gets to the point where it creates this delicious ojas, deep, deep nourishment, and it leaves no toxic waste, and it just eliminates what it cannot use fully, right? So it doesn't burden the digestive system with heaviness and all of this kind of stuff that causes disease, right? The digestive system just moves in a very, very fluid way. And what it means about the lived experience is that we receive everything that comes and we open to it so that we can meet the feelings and the sensations, and we don't resist, so that we can digest all of life, every situation, right? And again, when we can fully digest every situation and we turn resistance and struggle and suffering into, we alchemize it through feeling the feelings, and we turn it similarly into, here we would call it bliss or tejas. It's like the brilliance of being, right? It's light, right? So we transmute it. We transmute it through feeling the feelings. Where these processes, the physicality in a way is an alchemizer or a distillery, an antenna. It's transmuting and it's refining everything. And as it refines everything, the refinery, all it wants to leave is the finest rasa. And that rasayana, it starts to rejuvenate. It starts to rejuvenate the layers. Even the physicality can be rejuvenated, but the pranic body can be rejuvenated. So there's more vital energy, right? More vital life flow, able to get through, because it's not burdened. It's not burdened and heavy with all of the heaviness, right, that we can take in. And so it's the same with what we, in a way, what we seem to choose to take in. If we spend hours and hours on the computer, right? Systems get heavy, right? Tamasic, right? Gets inertia, laden, burdened. It starts to create like a burdened toxicity. But it can be the same too if we're too over energized and we're doing, like A-type, right? Doing, holding on, trying to hold on. Again, that rajasic energy, it becomes like toxic. So we want to keep a balance. And so we speak about sattva and keeping the life very sattvic. We need some of that tamas and we need some of that rajas to keep things moving and to allow us to rest, right? But we want to keep a balance. And as we keep a balance and we open and open and open, and then we feel the flow of life, as the flow of life, we're suddenly recognize that the true nature is this light being, is this Suddha Sattva, right? The transcendent field, this pure being, right? That we're living on light, we're living light, and we're just pulled to attune more with being the living light. And we're pulled more, let's say, to nature, so we can digest more light. We're pulled to consume foods that can be fully digested and can be digested all the way down to ojas and are light and lightening, right? So you can start to feel how, where you might have heard this as a wisdom teaching on the surface of life in parts, you start to feel the resonance of truth, and you start to feel the resonance in your whole being. And as the resonance of your whole being comes alive, it's the intelligence, It's what you're made of, right? And as you attune to the intelligence of what you're made of, it's like the intelligence starts to pull you into what truly nourishes, where you are enlivened, where you are illuminated, right? The company that you keep, the work that you do, all of this, it starts to shift and change to be deeply, deeply nourishing, like this flow of light, this flow of life, right? So this is what happens as we come to be the being that's flowing. So even if this isn't your direct experience, you can still right now feel the resonance on some level in the unseen. There is a refinement happening, and the intelligence recognizes itself and is refining and purifying itself, right? So none of this is about a doing. It's not about a doing. It's about coming to the being and being this flow of life, being the vital, alive flow of life. And here we start to recognize, as the aware being, in every moment, is what is here in this moment enlivening and nourishing? Can it be received in openness and fully digested? Does it leave toxic waste? Does it leave a heaviness? And if so, let it be illuminated. And what you can be sure of is if you illuminate it and it's recognized in the light of awareness, it will naturally, the consciousness of it will start to shift, right? So what happens here is that the subconscious patterning and the conditioning to move in certain ways and habits starts to shift naturally starts to shift. As the flow of life, all that life is drawn to is the flow of life. It is drawn to its own vitality. It's drawn to this flow of life in everything. So it starts to be drawn to that flow, to see the sameness of where that vibrant life is in foods, in environments, in companionship, right? It starts to recognize itself, and that it just is drawn to it be enlivened, to enliven itself. And it's drawn to illuminate what is holding a more heavy energy, what is not being fully digested, what is causing a burden, right? It's to really open to recognize this on the deepest level of your being, right? So as we're speaking of it here, we're bringing a deeper attunement to the intelligence that you are, the fine intelligence that you are, the consciousness that you are, what you are truly made of. We're coming to the finer frequencies. And here, as we come to the finer frequencies of life flowing in the knowing of itself, we start to open to this rasayana, this rejuvenation, this flow of light. We can start to open to feel more of what we spoke of as this, where the breath, the in and out of the breath, right? We don't need to follow pranayama exercises. It's naturally happening, right? In breath, the top of the in breath, infinite illuminated bliss. Natural exhalation happens. Couldn't stop it if you tried. Bottom, infinite, wide open bliss, right? So yes, when we do move in pranayama, there are conscious ways that the rishis brought forward, right? The wisdom was given to us by rishis, and we can follow pranayama to work with this natural flow. But if we're not really aligned with this natural flow, pranayama is just a set of exercises that most beings are probably not really doing quite right. But we do what we can, right? We do what we can. But when we come to this alignment, and you can really feel, it's as if you never leave. What you are in truth as the being is the top of the breath and the bottom of the breath, right? The naturalness. And as you can attune to the infinite at the top and the infinite at the bottom, you start to realize that you're the infinite space in which the whole of the flow of life is happening, that you are the infinite space, you are the being, you are the infinite unbounded, and the flow of life, the flow of breath is happening in you. You're not actually touched by it. You don't expire when the breath expires. You're the flow of life, eternal. You never expire. You never ever expire, right? Nothing can stop the flow of life that you are. And yet you can feel that you're animating the form. You're the infinity and the point. You're the infinity and the point. You're not as the point, you're not the person. You're the flow of life. Right? Rasayana, rejuvenation happening, natural flow, the flow of life, constantly animating the form, giving life to life itself as it animates the form, is clear seeing reality, or is mind consciousness buzzing away, holding on to memories of past and imaginings of future and creating a projected world, right? This is what world, Jagat, truly is. World is the created appearance of mind consciousness. It's a unique world appearance that the mind is creating. But when you are resting as the being, there is no world in the same way, right? There's reality, there's nature. You are that. You are the flow, you are the flow of life, you are the being itself, flowing in itself. And this process of refinement is a multi-dimensional transmutation where the whole of life is flowing to transmute and refine itself on all of the layers, through all of the koshas, right? You don't need to know the Vedic teaching just to feel the resonance. The intelligence is what it's all about. You are the intelligence, and the intelligence recognizes itself. It remembers itself. It gets sparked into remembering. What happens is next time you find yourself being animated and flowing in the supermarket, you suddenly find that you're buying more oranges and avocados and good stuff like that instead of chips, right? Instead of crunchy dead things, right? You just naturally recognize, oh, wow, I didn't even go to the chip aisle. I'm just here in the produce, filling up the whole basket till it's really heavy, right? That's what starts to happen naturally, is you can't help yourself because you're not the one with these mental ideas. You're not the one that says, I need to save money. I need to buy this. I like this. I like that. You're not that one, right? You're the flow of life that just wants to be alive, right? The flow of life wants to be alive, and it wants to attempt to rejuvenate the physicality, right? Miracles can happen when we're aligned with consciousness. And this is the natural Ayurveda. It's natural, intuitive wisdom flowing in itself, right? It's not information. It's not a teaching. It's nature. It's nature. It gets called the science of life, right? The science of life is, how does life live itself? How does life live itself? How does life nourish itself when it hasn't got a mind saying, I think I'll buy some more chips, right? How does life nourish itself, right? How does life want to nourish itself, right? And it's not imagining, right? It's not overlaying imaginings, because there's lots of good stuff. There's lots of good stuff that life wants to cook for itself, right? It's not what the mind imagines, right? It incorporates all kinds of foods. It has to nourish itself with a full spectrum in order to be whole, right? It's about wholeness. It's not about fads and diets and ideas. It's not about that. It's about wholeness on every level, wholeness on the surface of life, wholeness in the pranic energy body, wholeness in the depths of the wisdom body, and wholeness in the clearing of the emotional debris, right? Wholeness on every level. The natural intelligence knows, and as life is flowing in itself, harmonizing, balancing, it's creating exactly what is needed. And we can, as this flow of life, we can attune on any level. We can ask, we can open, right? The asking opens. What is the most divine, light-drenched nourishment? And it will show you, it will show you, it will show you. In food, in companionship, in environment, it will show you what is the finest possible nourishment. Open to the flow of life, open to all of yourself, and you will be shown where the nourishment is. Right? The being itself, nourishing itself in the knowing of itself. This is where the first recognition of aliveness is, in the presence of being. And the presence of being opens in the innermost being to recognize itself. And there's deep peace here. There's deep silence, the unmoving, unchanging. And yet there's this refinement that starts to happen as the being is being itself, and it starts to flow in the knowing of itself. It starts to remember itself in and as everything, in and as everyone, in and as it refines itself through even the appearance of world, right? It starts to devour the world. It starts to devour the world by surfacing, regurgitating all the old stresses and ideas and concepts and ideas, everything that is burdensome. It starts to devour it all by illuminating it and processing it through, so that there's more lightness and freedom and clarity, and life is living itself more fully, more wholly, right? More holy, more sacred, more rich in naturalness, right? So all of this, it's about naturalness. It's about nature, true nature. It's about naturalness. It's not about learning anything new. It's not about creating more ideas and concepts, not in any way. If there's even a single iota of a thought of, now I need to go and look this up, now I need to understand this. No, 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 no. Be yourself. Be the illumined presence of yourself and let the flow of life carry itself and illuminate itself, right? If there is wisdom that is needed, it will reveal itself, it will show itself, and it can sometimes offer itself by a book falling open on the right page, right? It can reveal itself in a Google search, but don't take it on as wisdom. Only come to the resonance, right? If you go into the external looking with the mind, then you're away from yourself. Let it reveal itself. Let the wisdom reveal itself. There's a field of intelligence, and you are the intelligence. Come to the vital flow of the aliveness of yourself, and the wisdom naturally reveals itself. Here now, the being itself, opening to itself, knowing itself. And the being itself, it will flow in exactly the ways that are right at each point, right? It will flow in exactly the right ways. It will move in all of the ways that it can to free itself. And it will do, let's say, the most pressing work. The most pressing work will always be to resolve the karmas. That will be its first call. And it might bring in certain other areas of refinement, but it will dissolve the karmic obscurations first, because the karmic obscurations are really the work of this life, the work of the human life, to know yourself so fully without the karmic obscurations. But it will attempt to refine itself in all of the ways that are perfect for the karmic obscurations to be cleared and the depth of life to live itself as fully and wholly as it can, for the knowing of itself to be rich enough that the point is recognized not to be someone, not even a character, but the point is recognized to be the divine emanation, the divine emanation in the oneness of being, in the wholeness. The being that you are is the one being. There is only one. And this is all about the depth of recognition of the oneness all the way through, refining itself all the way through to remember itself in and as everything, to know itself. And this is where consciousness experiences itself in the light of awareness in order to know itself and merge all of the discordant patternings, the habits and conditionings into the vast, infinite field that is the universal cosmic consciousness, in order that consciousness can refine itself so that consciousness itself collapses to leave only itself, to leave only Brahman, God, the divine wholeness. So we can taste flavors of all of this that we're speaking of. Little taste here, little taste here, little taste here, little taste. Digest the taste, right? This is why we speak of take in the nourishment, take in the nectar of recognition, take it in, because it is such deep, deep divine nourishment to be yourself, to be resting in an absorption, in a depth of samadhi, of resting. It's the depth of nourishment that is where the being is nourishing itself. And that nectarine flow of bliss is flowing and carrying itself deeper. It's even transmuting within the consciousness. And when it transmutes within the consciousness, it actually can transmute karmic obscurations without them needing to play out, right? The mind can have ideas, can take on conceptual ideas that everything has to play out. Not so. It can transmute within the deep, deep nourishment of being. We could say you could rest in samadhi and digest all of the karmic obscurations, right? This is how a being that rests in a cave or in silence for 20 years digests the karmic obscurations without having to dance in the world and play out relationship dynamics and this and that and all of that, right? So it's not that likely that that will happen. So the playing out is the kindness and the possibility. So we're like hybrids. We're hybrids. We're resting as deeply in the being and in samadhi, in the nectarine bliss, and digesting, transmuting deep the stresses just through resting in samadhi. Resting in the transcendent is digesting the stresses, and where necessary, dynamics will play out on the surface of life. And there's a perfection to all of it. We are receiving it, we're living it, we're transmuting through the lived experience, and it's just as potent, right? Don't come to a new concept that we need to find a cave. The lived experience, the lived embodied integration is just as potent, just as potent. We could say that even as the living emanation in the divine knowing, the lived experience ends up, the living out of life ends up being all that's left, right? All that's left. And this is a constant, the transmutation. It's a miracle, right? It's the miracle. It's the miracle. It's all just happening. It's all just happening. Couldn't be any other way. It's all just happening. Life living itself. Light, light, living itself. Light, living itself. So digest the deep nectarine bliss of being, and digest the play of life, digest fully on every level, and notice, what does it feel like to be holding undigested material? What does it feel like to not be able to digest, right? Like a discomfort where there's toxic waste, ama, right? It's where there's leftovers, right? What does that feel like? And then this illuminated possibility to shine the light and clear the patterns that keep repeating that creation of undigestible situations that at some point, let's regurgitate it. Let's burp it all the way up, right? Let's even purge it all the way up and just spill it out. Hold a space. Let it spill out and be fully met all the way through, right? Purification will happen in exactly the ways that are required. It's all divine, it's all perfection, it's all the flow of life living itself. And it's always now, here, this, just as it is, just like this, just as you are, natural, simple. We're not creating moods. We're not creating spiritual environments. We're coming to a depth of naturalness, of being the being, unprotected, open, free, illuminated, flow of unconditional love, wide, open heart, honest, transparent, clear, right? This is what we are flowing into. A river of light, flowing, illuminating, transmuting, and continuing to flow and flow. And as that flow of grace flows, it's shining, shining, shining. It's radiant truth. Shining, right? Clarity, shining, brilliance, right? Shining, innocence, purity. It's what you are. It's what you already are. And all that is happening is we are clearing all of the obscurations. All of the obscurations. So this shining truth can truly shine right on the surface of life. Right now. Right now. Right now. Wide open heart, shining, radiant truth. Just as you are, saying yes, resting in the bliss of being, saying yes, and just drinking in the deep nectar and being nourished in the depths of the innermost being, in the knowing. Feel the resonance of recognition. Where the resonance of recognition is where the recognition of what you already are is already shining its eternal light. Feel the resonance of truth. Feel the enlivened field of intelligence that already knows and already is and is already shining.